Welcome back to Wealth Signal. I'm Alex Carter, and what I'm about to share with you today might be the most important financial reset of the decade. Stay with me. The biggest IPO in market history just launched, $1.75 trillion. SpaceX is now public, and I'm not buying a single share. Here's exactly why and where I'm putting my money instead.
The headlines are screaming. Every financial channel is covering it. And investors everywhere are asking the same question. Should I get in now? But here's what most people are missing. The real story isn't about SpaceX at all. It's about what this IPO reveals about where the market is actually heading. And when you see it clearly, everything changes.
If you're serious about understanding where the smart money is moving right now, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss what's coming next.
Let's start with myth number 1, that this IPO is going to shake the entire market. Here's the thing, $75 billion sounds enormous, but the Nasdaq trades about $500 billion every single day. The NYSE trades around $600 billion daily. That's over $1 trillion moving through markets every 24 hours. So, yes, $75 billion is the largest IPO in history, but it's going into a market that barely notices. Think about it this way. Even if every dollar of this IPO came from NVIDIA, which has a $5 trillion market cap, the stock would barely move 5%. Markets are built to absorb capital. That's what they do. There's also the question of anchoring. When Anthropic raised $65 billion in the private market last month, that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. When OpenAI raised $122 billion earlier this year, that number sounds insane. But here's the truth. We've been stair-stepping our way to this reality slowly. The world grew up around these numbers. The problem is, most investors didn't grow up with it. They're still anchoring to what big meant in 2010. A mega-cap stock back then was $75 to $100 billion. Today, it's $2 to $5 trillion. The numbers aren't crazy. Your reference point is just outdated. Now, myth number 2, that retail investors should jump into SpaceX right now. This is where it gets really interesting. SpaceX isn't a rocket company. Read their S-1 filing carefully, and they say their total addressable market is $28.5 trillion, nearly US GDP. Of that, only $2 trillion is space. The other $26.5 trillion? That's artificial intelligence, specifically enterprise AI services. SpaceX has positioned itself as an AI company that happens to build rockets, not a rocket company that dabbles in AI. That's a completely different investment thesis, and most retail investors are missing it entirely. But should you buy it at IPO? Think about Facebook. When it went public in 2012 at a $100 billion valuation, everyone called it a slam dunk. 6 months later, the stock was down 50%. Not because Facebook was a bad business, it was a great business. But the market had questions about monetizing mobile. It took patience. If you'd waited and bought at the bottom, you would have done dramatically better than the IPO buyer. SpaceX today is a very large company that doesn't yet have massive revenues to match its valuation. The AI enterprise sales they're banking on are still a ways off. For patient investors, the better entry point may come later, not tomorrow. Which brings us to myth number 3, and this one is the most important one, that the AI growth story is over. It isn't, not even close. Think about where we actually are in this cycle. Phase 1 of AI was all about building. Companies poured hundreds of billions into data centers, computing infrastructure, chips. Last year alone, spending on data center capex hit nearly $500 billion. This year, it's expected to reach $650 to $700 billion. By 2028, estimates put it at $1 trillion a year. That infrastructure build-out is not stopping. But something shifted in 2026. We entered Phase 2, the selling phase. Companies like Anthropic, which went from $4.5 billion in revenue in 2025 to a $47 billion annual run rate in just 6 months, are now actually selling AI products to enterprises at massive scale. That's a 10x revenue increase in 6 months. Let that number land. Phase 1 was build the infrastructure. Phase 2 is sell it to businesses. And Phase 3, the one that will create the real melt-up, is when those businesses start showing the ROI. When a company can prove that their $10 million AI spend generated $30 million in savings or new revenue. We aren't there yet, but we're closer than most people think. Here's the historical pattern you need to understand. Every major innovation cycle in American market history follows the same arc. You get roughly 8 years of strong performance driven by a new technology. It builds into a boom. The boom becomes a bubble. And at the peak, you get an incredible melt-up, gains pulled forward in a very short window. Then it ends, and what follows is a lost decade. Look at the late 90s internet boom. After the peak in 2000, it took 13 years for the market to hit a new high. 13 years of dead money. If you're 55 years old today, and the next peak comes in 2 to 3 years, you may not see another bull market in your investing lifetime. That's not fear-mongering. That's history. So what does the smart investor actually do right now? 3 things. First, don't chase the IPO hype. SpaceX may be a great company, but great companies at peak valuation, before their revenue story is proven, are historically poor short-term investments. Be patient. The better entry usually comes within 12 months of a high-profile IPO. Second, recognize that we are still in the growth phase of the AI cycle, not the end. The infrastructure is built. The enterprise sales are ramping. The ROI phase hasn't arrived yet, and that's when the real acceleration happens. Third, and this is the most important, know that this cycle will end. It always does. The investors who win are those who ride the melt-up with discipline, take profits at the right time, and don't give them all back trying to squeeze every last dollar out of the top.
Drop a comment below. Are you buying SpaceX at IPO, or are you waiting? I read every single comment. And if this video gave you a clearer picture of where we actually are in this market cycle, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this.
The bottom line is this: SpaceX is a historic event, but history doesn't pay your bills. Positioning does. The AI growth cycle has more runway than most people realize, but it will end, and the investors who understand the pattern will be the ones who come out ahead. Don't let the hype of one IPO distract you from the bigger picture that's still unfolding. The real question isn't whether SpaceX is a good company. It is. The real question is, are you in the right position to benefit from what comes next?
If you want to stay ahead of these moves, subscribe to Wealth Signal. We break down what matters, cut through the noise, and help you think like an investor, not a spectator. I'm Alex Carter, and I'll see you in the next one.